The stars had never seen anything like the Valorian Empire. For 3,000 years, their black ships had swept across the galaxy like a plague of metal locusts. Every world they touched fell silent. Every species they met either bowed down or died. Admiral Kextar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. His 8-foot frame was covered in thick, dark armor that looked like it grew from his body. Sharp spikes jutted from his shoulders and arms. His face was a nightmare of cutting edges and glowing red eyes. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. "Report," he ordered his navigation officer. "We approach the Outer Rim systems, Admiral. Sector designation: human space." Kextar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for Valorian laughter. "Humans, another weak species to crush under our heels. How many ships do they have?" "Our scouts count maybe 300 vessels across 12 star systems. Primitive technology, chemical rockets and simple laser weapons." The Admiral turned to look at the massive holographic display that showed their fleet. 1,000 ships of pure destruction. Each one could turn a planet into burning rock. 300 ships, he repeated slowly. "We have conquered empires with 10,000 ships. These humans will not even slow us down." Behind him, the bridge crew worked at their stations. All Valorians, all perfect warriors. They had never lost a battle. They had never even been challenged by an enemy that lasted more than a few days. The Valorians believed they were the ultimate form of life in the universe. They called themselves Alpha. They believed it was their right to rule everything. Far away on the human colony of New Busan, Captain Jiwan was having a very bad day. She sat in her small office looking at reports that made no sense. The deep space monitoring stations had picked up massive energy readings moving toward their system. The readings were bigger than anything humans had ever seen. "Captain," her technical officer Minho called from the communication center. "You need to see this." Jiwan walked over to his station. Minho was young, maybe 25, with nervous hands that never stopped moving. He pointed at his screen. "These signals are not natural. Something is coming toward us. Something very big." "How big?" "If these readings are right, we are looking at maybe 1,000 ships. Each one is bigger than our largest battleship." Jiwan felt cold fear in her stomach. New Busan was a small colony. They had maybe 50,000 people and a dozen defensive ships. Against 1,000 enemy vessels, they would last about 5 minutes. "Send a message to Earth Command," she ordered. "Tell them we need help, fast." In the research station on the colony's main continent, Hyeji was making a discovery that would change everything. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life. Her job was usually boring. Most days she looked at strange plants and small creatures from other worlds, but today was different. Her computers had picked up alien radio signals. Not just random noise, but actual conversations. The translation programs were working hard to make sense of the strange language. When the first translation came through, Hyeji thought there was an error. She ran the program again. The same message appeared on her screen. "Sector 847 conquered. All inferior life forms eliminated. Population 0. Claim filed for Valorian expansion." Hyeji stared at the words. She ran more translations. Each message was the same. Reports of conquered worlds. Lists of dead species. Celebrations of genocide. These aliens did not just want to conquer human space. They wanted to wipe out every human who had ever lived. She grabbed her communicator and called Captain Jiwan. "Captain, we have a big problem. These aliens, they are not just invaders. They are exterminators. They kill every living thing on the planets they conquer." The communication channel was quiet for a long moment. Then Jiwan's voice came back, steady but grim. "How long until they get here?" "Based on their speed, maybe 2 days. 2 days to live or die," Jiwan said quietly. On board the Eternal Dominance, Admiral Kextar was reviewing files on human civilization. The reports were thin. Humans had only been in space for a few hundred years. They had no real weapons. Their largest ships were cargo haulers and passenger transports converted for military use. "Admiral," his intelligence officer reported, "the humans have no significant military technology. Their weapons are primitive chemical explosives and basic laser systems. They have never fought a space war." Kextar nodded. It was always the same story. Weak species with weak technology and weak spirits. "Have they responded to our approach?" "Yes, sir. They appear to be mobilizing their entire fleet to defend their colony world." "All of their ships?" "How many?" 15 vessels, Admiral. 15 ships against our 1,000. The bridge crew made clicking sounds that served as Valorian laughter. 15 ships. It was almost insulting. The smallest Valorian destroyer could handle 15 human ships without taking damage. Set course for the human colony, Kextar ordered. We will end this quickly and move on to more important conquests. Back on New Busan, Captain Jiwon gathered her senior staff in the main conference room. Around the table sat the colony's best and brightest. Military officers, engineers, scientists, and civilian leaders. Their faces were grim. The situation is simple, Jiwon began. A massive alien fleet is coming to destroy us. We have no way to stop them. Earth Command cannot send help in time. We are alone. Junho, a former military engineer who now worked civilian construction, raised his hand. Captain, maybe we are thinking about this wrong. These aliens have better technology than us, but they have never fought humans before. Maybe they do not know what we are capable of. What do you mean? Asked Deho, the colony's security chief. Every species they have conquered before probably fought like them. Big ships, heavy weapons, traditional military tactics. But humans do not always fight fair. We use tricks. We improvise. We survive. Hyeji spoke up from her seat at the end of the table. According to their communications, they expect us to surrender immediately. They have never had a species refuse to give up. Then maybe it is time someone taught them a lesson, Jiwon said. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. They could not win a normal space battle, but maybe they did not need to fight a normal space battle. Start preparing the colony for siege, Jiwon ordered. Hide our civilians in the deep shelters. Convert every piece of equipment we can into weapons. And send one more message to Earth. What should the message say? Asked Nari, the communications officer. Tell them that the colony of New Busan will not go quietly into the dark. Tell them we will make these aliens remember our name. Outside the station windows, the stars continued to shine peacefully, but somewhere in the darkness between worlds, death was coming. The Valorians thought they were about to crush another weak species. They had no idea what humans were capable of when their backs were against the wall. The Valorian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Busan system. 1,000 black ships spread across space like a dark cloud. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destruction, built for one purpose, to kill everything that opposed the Valorian Empire. Admiral Kexitar stood before his main view screen, watching the small human colony world spinning slowly in the distance. It looked peaceful, green and blue with white clouds swirling across its surface. Soon it would be nothing but burning rock. Open a communication channel to the humans, he ordered. The view screen changed to show the bridge of a human ship. A woman in a simple blue uniform looked back at him. Her face was calm, but Kextar could see fear in her eyes. Good. Fear made conquest easier. I am Admiral Kextar of the Valorian Empire, he began, his voice deep and threatening. You will surrender your colony immediately. All humans will be relocated to processing centers. Your ships will power down and prepare to be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply. The human woman, Captain Jiwon, according to his intelligence files, looked directly into the camera. No. Kextar's mandibles clicked in surprise. No alien species had ever refused his surrender demand. Perhaps you do not understand. We have 1,000 ships. You have 15. Surrender now and your death will be quick. I understand perfectly, Jiwon replied. You want us to give up and die quietly? The answer is still no. Then you have chosen extinction. Kextar cut the communication channel. He turned to his weapons officer. Destroy 3 of their moons. Show them what defying the Valorian Empire costs. The Eternal Dominance and 2 other ships moved into firing position, their main weapons charged with energy that could crack planets. 3 beams of pure destruction lanced out across space. 3 small moons that orbited New Busan simply vanished in balls of white fire. Now, Kextar said with satisfaction, open the channel again. Captain Jiwon's face appeared on the screen. Behind her, Kextar could see other humans running around their bridge, but her expression had not changed. Have you reconsidered? He asked. Yes, Jiwon said calmly. We have decided that you are definitely the enemy. Again, she cut the communication. Kextar stared at the blank screen. This had never happened before. Humans were supposed to be terrified. They were supposed to beg for mercy. Instead, this female was treating him like an annoyance. Admiral, his scanning officer called out. The human ships are moving into attack formation. 15 ships against our 1,000? Kextar could not believe what he was hearing. Have they lost their minds? On the bridge of the human ship Defiant, Captain Jiwon was giving final orders to her small fleet. Through her view screen, she could see the massive Valorian armada spreading across space like a disease. All ships, this is Jiwon. We all know what we are facing. We cannot win this battle with normal tactics. So we will not use normal tactics. Hunyo, is your surprise ready? Junho's voice came through the communication system from the modified cargo ship Iron Fist. Ready, Captain. Though I should mention that what we are about to do probably violates every space combat regulation ever written. Good, Jiwon replied. Daeho, are your teams in position? Security teams are ready, Daeho confirmed from the colony surface. If they want this planet, they will have to fight for every inch. Nari, send our message to Earth now. Make sure they understand what happened here. Nari's fingers flew over her control panel. Message sent, Captain. Quantum burst transmission. Earth will receive it in 6 hours. Jiwon took a deep breath. All ships attack pattern chaos. Make them remember that humans do not go quietly. The small human fleet charged toward the Valorian armada. It should have been a slaughter. 15 small ships against 1,000 massive warships. The Valorians expected to destroy the humans in minutes. But humans had spent their entire history fighting enemies bigger and stronger than themselves. They had learned to use intelligence instead of strength, creativity instead of raw power. Junho's cargo ship Iron Fist led the attack. But instead of firing weapons, it released its cargo bay full of mining explosives. Hundreds of small charges scattered across space, each one guided by a simple navigation computer. The Valorians had never seen this tactic before. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons and large missiles, not clouds of tiny explosives. The charges slipped through their defenses and attached to their ship hulls like metal parasites. What are those? Kekstar demanded as alarms began sounding across his fleet. Unknown devices, Admiral. They appear to be mining charges. The explosions began a moment later. Not enough to destroy the massive Valorian ships, but enough to damage their weapon systems and communication arrays. Suddenly, instead of a perfectly coordinated fleet, Kekstar had 1,000 confused ships trying to figure out what had just happened. Captain Jiwon's ship Defiant dove through the chaos, its small size allowing it to dodge between the larger Valorian vessels. Her weapons officer had replaced their standard laser cannons with modified industrial cutting tools. They were not as powerful as military weapons, but they could cut through Valorian armor in ways the aliens did not expect. On the colony surface, Daeho watched through his binoculars as Valorian landing ships began descending from orbit. Hundreds of them, black against the sky like falling death. All teams remember the plan, he spoke into his communicator. Let them land. Let them think they have won. Then show them what a human welcome party looks like. The first Valorian troops landed near the colony's main city. They emerged from their ships expecting to face terrified civilians. Instead, they found empty streets and buildings that seemed abandoned. Commander Thekvar led his warriors forward, their heavy armor clanking against the pavement. Secure the area. Find the humans. That was when Junho's second surprise activated. The colony's entire infrastructure had been converted into weapons. Streetlights became explosive charges. Water pipes became projectile launchers. Even the colony's waste disposal system had been turned into a delivery method for chemical weapons. The Valorian warriors had never fought an enemy that used an entire city as a weapon. Their armor protected them from direct attacks, but not from the creativity of desperate humans. Daeho's security teams struck from hidden positions. They used weapons the Valorians had never seen before. Modified construction tools, improvised explosives, even simple projectile weapons that fired metal bolts fast enough to punch through alien armor. What kind of species fights with construction equipment? Thekvar asked his communication officer as another of his soldiers fell to a weapon that looked like a mining drill. Unknown, Commander. Our intelligence files contain no reference to these tactics. In space, Admiral Kekstar was learning the same lesson. Human ships were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They used their cargo holds as weapon bays. They converted civilian equipment into military hardware. They even used their own damaged ships as guided missiles, ramming them into Valorian vessels at full speed. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we have lost contact with 47 ships. Another 100 report significant damage. How is this possible? Kekstar demanded. They only have 15 ships. Had 15 ships, sir. They are down to 8. but they have caused more damage to our fleet than the last 50 species we conquered combined. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Kextar felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. The humans were losing. Their ships were being destroyed, their planet was being invaded, but they were fighting with a ferocity that made no sense. Most species fought to preserve their lives, their families, their way of life. When defeat became certain, they surrendered to save what they could. Humans seemed to be fighting for the simple right to hurt their enemies as much as possible before they died. On the surface, Tekvar received new orders from his admiral. Accelerate the conquest. These humans are proving more dangerous than expected. But as he tried to advance deeper into the colony, another human surprise waited. The buildings themselves had been rigged to collapse in specific patterns, creating maze-like barriers that channeled his troops into carefully prepared kill zones. "Sir," one of his warriors reported, "the humans have turned their own city into a trap." Tekvar looked around at the twisted metal and debris that blocked every street. What kind of species destroys its own home just to inconvenience the enemy? He was about to learn that humans had a word for that kind of fighting: spite. And spite, it turned out, was a very dangerous weapon. The quantum burst transmission from New Busan reached Earth like a bolt of lightning through the darkness. Admiral Taehyun was reviewing routine patrol reports in his office when the emergency communication arrived. He read it once, then read it again, then immediately called for an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council. The meeting room filled quickly with the most important people in human military and government. President Young-soo arrived first, followed by Director Sora from Advanced Weapons Research. Behind them came Strategic Analyst Kiwan and Intelligence Chief Jaemin. "The situation is simple," Taehyun began without ceremony. "New Busan is under attack by an alien empire that has conquered most of the galaxy. According to their own communications, they have wiped out over 200 intelligent species. They consider us next on their list." President Young-soo leaned forward in his chair. "What are their numbers?" 1,000 ships in the advance fleet. Unknown numbers in reserve. They call themselves the Valorian Empire, and they believe they are the ultimate form of life in the universe. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had never fought a real space war. Their ships were designed for exploration and cargo transport, with minimal weapons for dealing with pirates and minor threats. Director Sora spoke first. "Mr. President, I need immediate authorization to unlock the classified weapons programs." "Which programs?" "All of them. Project Hellfire, Project Nemesis. Even the ones we sealed because they were too dangerous for normal warfare." Young-soo looked around the table at the grim faces of his advisors. "Are you suggesting we use weapons we considered too terrible for humans to possess?" "I am suggesting," Sora replied carefully, "that these aliens have made a serious mistake. They think humans are just another weak species to be conquered. They have never fought an enemy that builds weapons for the simple pleasure of seeing things explode." Strategic Analyst Kiwan pulled up a holographic display showing the Valorian Empire's expansion pattern. Red dots marked conquered systems across thousands of light years. Their tactics are always the same: overwhelming force, psychological warfare, then systematic extermination. Every species they have faced followed predictable patterns of resistance and eventual surrender. "But humans are not predictable," Jaemin added. "Our psychological profile is completely different from every other species in their records. We do not fight to preserve our way of life. We fight because someone told us we could not." President Young-soo stood up slowly. "Gentlemen, Lady Sora, I want you to understand what you are asking me to authorize. You want to turn the entire human race into a weapon and point it at an enemy that has never been defeated?" "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. "Do it. Within hours, every human ship in space received new orders. Cargo vessels, passenger transports, mining ships, research vessels. Even luxury yachts were ordered to report to the nearest military depot for immediate conversion to warships." Sora's weapons teams worked around the clock, installing military hardware on civilian ships. They had no time for elegant solutions or careful engineering. They used whatever worked, however it worked. Mining ships got their ore processors converted into mass drivers that could launch asteroids at enemy targets. Passenger ships had their comfortable cabins replaced with missile launchers. Even scientific research vessels were fitted with experimental weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. The conversion was chaotic, dangerous, and completely against every regulation in the military handbook. It was also the most human response possible to an impossible situation. On the research station orbiting Mars, Kiwan was developing humanity's battle plan. Traditional military strategy said they should consolidate their forces, establish defensive positions, and try to hold strategic points until reinforcements could arrive. Kiwan threw traditional strategy out the nearest airlock. "If we fight them like they expect," he explained to his planning team, "we will lose exactly like every other species has lost." But what if we do not fight them like they expect? What if we attack them in places they think are safe? His plan was simple and completely insane. Instead of defending human space, they would attack Valorian space. Instead of fighting defensive battles, they would strike at the enemy's supply lines, communication networks, and home systems. "The Valorians have conquered 847 star systems," Kiwan continued. "That means they have 847 systems they think are secure. 847 systems they are not defending properly. 847 targets for us to hit." Jamin's intelligence teams were already working to identify those targets. They had intercepted enough Valorian communications to understand their empire's structure. The aliens had grown so confident in their superiority that they barely guarded their rear areas. According to their own records, Jamin reported, most Valorian systems have only token defensive forces. They assume that any enemy they face will be destroyed at the border before they can threaten the Empire's core worlds. "Then we will teach them the danger of assumptions," Taehyun said grimly. The first human strike force launched just 3 days after the attack on New Busan. Captain Sunho commanded a converted mining vessel called Iron Will. His crew was a mix of former military personnel and civilian volunteers who had signed up for what everyone knew was probably a suicide mission. Their target was a Valorian supply depot 3 systems, away from New Busan. According to intelligence reports, it was lightly defended and contained enough military supplies to keep the enemy fleet operational for months. "Remember," Sunho told his crew as they approached their target, "we are not trying to win this battle. We are trying to make them remember it." The Iron Will dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on top of the supply depot. The Valorian defenders had been expecting merchant ships and civilian traffic. They were not expecting a human mining ship that had been converted into a flying weapon. Sunho's crew had replaced the ship's mining charges with military explosives. Instead of breaking apart asteroids, they were about to break apart enemy ships. The conversion was crude and dangerous, but it worked. The supply depot's defenders managed to send out a distress signal before the Iron Will completed its mission. That signal reached Admiral Kekstar just as he was dealing with the continuing resistance on New Busan. "Admiral," his communication officer reported, "we have lost contact with Supply Depot 7. The last transmission reported attack by unknown vessels." Kekstar stared at the tactical display. Supply Depot 7 was 3 systems away from the battle zone. How could humans have attacked it when their entire fleet was supposedly fighting for New Busan? "Send a patrol to investigate," he ordered, but the patrol found only wreckage and a message broadcast on all Valorian frequencies. It was short and spoken in barely comprehensible Valorian by someone who had obviously learned the language recently. "This is Captain Sunho of the human vessel Iron Will. Your supply depot has been destroyed. Your sense of safety is an illusion. We are coming for all of you." For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, a Valorian admiral felt fear, not fear of defeat in battle. His forces still vastly outnumbered the humans, but fear of something worse. The unknown. Every enemy the Valorians had ever faced fought predictable wars for predictable reasons. They defended their homes, protected their families, and surrendered when defeat became certain. Humans were doing something different. They were launching suicide attacks against targets that had no strategic value. They were destroying their own infrastructure rather than let it be captured. They were fighting a war that made no tactical sense. "Get me a direct line to Valorian command," Kekstar ordered. "Tell them we need reinforcements, and tell them that these humans are not like any enemy we have faced before." "What should I tell them about the humans' capabilities, Admiral?" Kekstar looked at the reports coming in from New Busan. His ground forces were still fighting from building to building against an enemy that had turned an entire city into a weapon. His fleet was suffering casualties from improvised attacks using converted civilian equipment, and now human ships were somehow appearing in systems that should have been completely secure. Tell them, he said slowly, that we may have made a serious mistake. Back on Earth, President Youngsu was reading casualty reports from the first wave of attacks. The numbers were terrible. Nearly every human ship in the strike forces had been destroyed. Most of the crews were dead. But the intelligence reports told a different story. Valorian communications were full of confusion and growing concern. Their supply lines were being disrupted. Their sense of invincibility was cracking. Are we winning? Youngsu asked Admiral Taehyun. No, sir. We are losing badly. But we are making them pay for it. And most importantly, we are making them think. Think about what? About whether conquering humanity is worth the cost. The Valorians have spent 3,000 years crushing weak enemies. They have never fought anyone who hits back this hard. Youngsu nodded grimly. Continue the attacks, and prepare the next phase. The next phase was something no sane military strategist would ever recommend. Instead of trying to save what they could, humanity was preparing to bet everything on one final throw of the dice. They were going to attack the Valorian homeworld itself. It was a plan so insane that it just might work. After all, who would expect a species with... The human counteroffensive began 6 weeks after the first attack on New Busan. By then, the small colony world had fallen, but not before its defenders had taught the Valorians a lesson they would never forget. It had taken the alien empire 3 months to fully control a single human planet that should have surrendered in 3 hours. Captain Sunho stood on the bridge of his new ship, Revenge. His previous vessel, Iron Will, had been destroyed in the attack on the Valorian supply depot. But the human ship replacement program was working at impossible speed. Every destroyed vessel was replaced by 2 more, converted from civilian ships with whatever weapons could be mounted on them. Target acquired, reported his navigation officer Yoonji, a former terraforming engineer who had volunteered for military service. Valorian Communication Relay Station, Sector 445. 3 light cruisers defending. Sunho nodded. Begin the approach. Remember, we are not trying to capture anything. We are here to break their toys. The Revenge and her escort ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valorian system. The communication relay was a massive structure that helped coordinate military traffic across 50 star systems. Destroying it would blind the enemy fleet for days, but Sunho was not interested in just destroying the relay. Yoonji had developed something much more effective, the Scorched Earth Protocol. If they want to claim our worlds, she had explained to the planning committee, they should get what they expect from humans when we are angry. Nothing but poisoned ground. The Valorian defenders moved to intercept the human ships. 3 against 8 seemed like good odds, until the human ships started doing things that made no tactical sense. Instead of engaging in normal space combat, the human vessels scattered in all directions. Some launched their cargo holds as makeshift missiles. Others simply rammed enemy ships at full speed. One ship, commanded by a former asteroid miner named Minsu, actually used his mining charges to blow up his own ship right next to the enemy flagship. But the real surprise came when Yoonji's ship reached the communication relay. Instead of trying to destroy it with weapons, she released a cloud of modified nanobots originally designed for planetary terraforming. The nanobots ate through the relay's structure in minutes, but they did not stop there. They were programmed to reproduce and spread, turning anything they touched into more copies of themselves. Within hours, they would spread to any Valorian ship that came too close. Mission completed, Yoonji reported as her ship pulled away from the dying relay. Relay destroyed, and I have left them a present that will keep destroying things for months. The Valorian defenders tried to pursue, but their ships started showing system failures as the nanobots spread through their hulls. Within days, the entire system would be too dangerous for any Valorian vessel to enter. Similar attacks were happening across Valorian space. Human ships appeared in systems that were supposed to be secure, caused as much damage as possible, then vanished before the enemy could respond effectively. Admiral Kextar was receiving reports of attacks on supply depots, communication relays, and even civilian colonies. Each attack was small by itself, but together they were crippling the Valorian Empire's ability to coordinate its massive military machine. How many human ships are out there? He demanded from his intelligence officer. Unknown, Admiral. Our estimates keep changing. Each time we destroy a human vessel, 2 more appear somewhere else. They seem to be converting their entire civilian fleet into warships. That is impossible. No species has ever done such a thing. No species has ever needed to, Admiral. Most enemies surrender before requiring such desperate measures. Kextar studied the tactical display showing Valorian space. Red markers indicated systems under attack or communication blackouts. There were dozens of them, scattered across hundreds of light years. They are not fighting to win, he said slowly. They are fighting to make us lose. I do not understand the difference, Admiral. Winning means defeating the enemy and taking their territory. What the humans are doing is making our territory too expensive to hold. They are turning our own empire into a burden. On the human ship Destiny, Captain Ji-young was putting the final touches on humanity's most ambitious plan yet. She was a former xenopsychologist who had studied alien behavior patterns. Her mission was not to destroy Valorian ships or bases. Her mission was to destroy something much more important: Valorian confidence. The Valorians have ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, she explained to her crew. Their entire society is built on the idea that they are superior to all other life forms. But what happens when a superior species starts losing to an inferior one? Her target was not a military installation or supply depot. It was a Valorian breeding world, one of the planets where young Valorians were raised to believe in their own invincibility. The planet was defended by only a small garrison. Why would anyone attack a world full of civilians? The Valorians could not imagine such a thing. They were about to learn that humans had very different ideas about acceptable targets. The Destiny and her escort ships arrived at the breeding world under cover of a communication blackout caused by previous human attacks. By the time the Valorian defenders realized they were under attack, it was too late. But Ji-young was not planning to harm the civilian population. She had something much more psychologically devastating in mind. Her ships broadcast a signal that overrode every communication device on the planet. Every Valorian, from the smallest child to the eldest adult, received the same message at the same time. This is Captain Ji-young of the human fleet. You have been taught that your species is the ultimate form of life. You have been taught that you are superior to all others. You have been taught that you can never be defeated. Today we are here to teach you that you were taught lies. The message continued with detailed reports of every Valorian defeat, every destroyed supply depot, every communication relay turned to scrap metal. It included recordings of human ships destroying Valorian vessels 10 times their size. It showed Valorian warriors being defeated by human civilians using improvised weapons. But the most devastating part was the conclusion. Your empire has existed for 3,000 years. It has conquered 847 star systems. It has destroyed 200 species. It took humans 6 weeks to bring it to its knees. You are not superior. You are not the ultimate form of life. You are just another species that made the mistake of thinking humans would quietly accept extinction. The message was broadcast continuously for 3 days before the human ships withdrew. They left the planet untouched, its population unharmed but psychologically shattered. Reports of the broadcast spread through Valorian space faster than their damaged communication network could stop them. Young Valorian warriors began questioning orders. Civilian populations started asking why their invincible empire was losing to primitive humans. Admiral Kextar received word of the psychological warfare attack while dealing with 3 more supply depot destructions and a coordinated strike on his fleet's repair facilities, sir, his political officer reported. We are receiving complaints from the home systems. Civilian populations are demanding explanations for our difficulties. Difficulties? Kextar's mandibles clicked in anger. We are facing a species that converts garbage haulers into warships and children's toys into weapons. A species that attacks our secure systems with suicide missions and turns our own territory against us. And the civilians call this difficulties? What should I tell them, Admiral? Kextar looked at his tactical display. Half the markers were red, indicating systems under attack or out of communication. His mighty fleet was scattered across dozens of systems, chasing human raiders who appeared and vanished like ghosts. Tell them, he said slowly, that we have learned something important about humans. When you corner a dangerous animal, it becomes more dangerous, not less. We have cornered the humans, and now we are discovering just how dangerous they can be. Should we request reinforcements from the core worlds? Reinforcements to do what? Fight an enemy that refuses to stand still long enough to be defeated? Hunt down ships that hide among asteroids and space debris? Guard every single installation in an empire that spans 1,000 star systems? The Admiral turned away from the display. For the first time in his career, he was beginning to understand why the humans had refused his surrender demand. It was not because they thought they could win. It was because they had decided that if they were going to lose, they would make sure the victory cost their enemies everything. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered. "Tell them that the human problem is more serious than we anticipated. Tell them that these creatures do not fight wars to win territory or preserve their way of life. They fight wars to prove that no one can make them quit." "And what do you recommend, Admiral?" Kekstar studied the reports of the latest human attacks. Mining ships converted into ram attack vessels, cargo haulers loaded with improvised explosives, scientific research ships that somehow managed to disable Valorian cruisers with equipment designed to study plant life. "I recommend," he said grimly, "that we start thinking very seriously about whether this conquest is worth the cost. Because at the rate the humans are destroying our infrastructure, we may find that winning this war means losing our empire." The war had been going on for 8 months when Captain Hansel received his final orders. His ship Final Answer was humanity's last desperate gambit, built around a weapon that existed only in theoretical physics papers. It represented everything humans had learned about their enemy. The Valorians could be beaten, but only if someone was willing to pay a price that no sane species would consider acceptable. Humans, as the galaxy was learning, were not entirely sane. "Target confirmed," reported Isul, his science officer. She had been an agricultural researcher before the war, someone who spent her days studying plant genetics and soil composition. Now she was calibrating a weapon designed to kill an entire species. "Valorian homeworld, 47 light-years from our current position," she continued. "Population approximately 12 billion. Primary military command center for their entire empire." Hansel nodded. "And our weapon status?" "The biological agent is ready for deployment. Once released into their atmosphere, it will spread across the entire planet within 72 hours. It will not kill them, but it will render every Valorian permanently blind." The plan was horrifyingly simple. Isil had used her knowledge of biology to create a virus that specifically targeted Valorian genetic markers. Not a killing virus. Humans were not interested in genocide. But a virus that would take away the one sense the Valorians depended on most. An alpha predator that could not see became prey overnight. "Sir," called Chewin from the communication station, "we are receiving updated intelligence reports from our deep infiltration teams." Hansel looked at the data appearing on his screen. Human ships had been conducting raids throughout Valorian space for months. But these missions were different. Small teams of volunteers had spent weeks gathering intelligence on Valorian society, technology, and psychology. What they had discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. "The Valorians have never faced sustained resistance," Chewin reported. "Their entire military doctrine is based on quick victories against enemies who surrender after the first show of force. They have no experience with long-term warfare. And their weaknesses? They depend heavily on visual targeting systems for their weapons. Their ships use optical scanners for navigation. Even their ground troops rely on sight-based tactics. If we can blind them, they become helpless," Hansel finished. "Any word from the other strike teams?" "Zungmin's team has reached the Valorian command center. Dongmin's group is in position at their main communication hub. All teams are ready for the final assault." Hansel studied the tactical display showing the Valorian homeworld. It was heavily defended, surrounded by thousands of ships and orbital weapons platforms. Under normal circumstances, attacking it would be suicide. But these were not normal circumstances. For 8 months, human raiders had been systematically destroying Valorian infrastructure throughout the galaxy. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were crippled. The mighty empire was struggling to coordinate its own defenses. "Begin the final approach," Hansel ordered, "and prepare the message for broadcast." The Final Answer and her escort ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valorian home system. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the enemy fleet. Hundreds of ships moved to intercept the human force, but they were too late. Human ships had been designed for one thing: speed. They raced through the Valorian defenses like arrows shot from a bow, too fast to be stopped by enemies who had grown slow and overconfident. As they flew toward the planet, Hansel activated the communication system that would broadcast to every receiver in Valorian space. "This is Captain Hansel of the human vessel Final Answer. For 8 months you have learned what happens when you underestimate humanity. Today you will learn what happens when you threaten our extinction. The message continued as human ships dodged through clouds of enemy fire. Some ships were hit and destroyed, but others kept coming. The Valorians had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for a single strike. You called yourselves Alpha. You claimed to be the ultimate form of life. You believed that might made right, and that right was yours alone. Today we are here to teach you the difference between being Alpha and being human. Isul's weapon, deployed as the final answer, entered the planet's atmosphere. Billions of microscopic viral particles spread into the air, invisible and unstoppable. Within hours, they would reach every Valorian on the planet. Within days, the virus would spread to every ship, every base, every outpost in their empire. But the true devastation was not biological. It was psychological. On the planet's surface, Valorian civilians and military personnel began receiving reports from their deep space monitoring stations. Human ships had appeared simultaneously at dozens of critical locations throughout their empire. Shungman's team had reached the main military command center and broadcast their final message. Your empire ends today, not because we destroyed your ships, but because we proved that Alpha is not a permanent position. Dongmin's group sent their own transmission from the communication hub. You should have thought about the consequences before you decided we were inferior. From across Valorian space, similar messages arrived. Human teams had infiltrated the Empire's most secure facilities and delivered the same conclusion. The war was over, and the Valorians had lost. But the final blow was not military. It was what K1 broadcast from the final answer as it pulled away from the Valorian homeworld. Citizens of the Valorian Empire, your leaders told you that you were superior to all other life. They told you that conquest was your right. They told you that no species could stand against your power. Today, a species you considered inferior has brought your 3,000-year empire to its knees in 8 months. The broadcast showed recordings from every human victory. Valorian ships destroyed by converted mining equipment. Valorian warriors defeated by human civilians using improvised weapons. Valorian military bases turned to scrap by enemies they had thought were helpless. Your ships still exist. Your technology still works. Your numbers still outnumber ours by thousands to one. But none of that matters anymore because you now know the truth. You are not special. You are not superior. You are just another species that made the mistake of picking a fight with humans. As the virus spread through Valorian space, something even more devastating spread with it. Doubt. Young Valorian warriors began questioning orders. Military commanders started making mistakes. Civilian populations demanded explanations that their leaders could not provide. An empire built on the belief in its own invincibility crumbled the moment that belief was proven false. Admiral Kekstar, now blind like every other Valorian in the fleet, sat in his command chair listening to reports of systematic military collapse. Ships were surrendering without firing a shot. Entire star systems were declaring independence from the Empire. The mighty Valorian war machine was falling apart as its operators lost the will to fight. Admiral, his political officer reported, "We are receiving surrender requests from 200 star systems. They are asking for human protection from Valorian retaliation. And our own forces? Morale has collapsed, sir. The crews are saying that if humans could do this to us, then perhaps we were never as superior as we believed." Kekstar nodded slowly. He had commanded fleets that conquered entire sectors of space. He had never lost a single battle in 40 years of service, but he understood military reality. "Send a message to the human fleet," he ordered. "Request negotiations for surrender." The reply came from Captain Hansel himself. "Admiral Kekstar, we will accept your surrender on one condition: the complete dismantling of the Valorian Empire and the liberation of all conquered territories. And if we refuse? Then we will continue doing what we have been doing for the last 8 months. We will hunt down every Valorian ship, destroy every Valorian base, and turn your entire empire into a collection of blind refugees floating in space." Kekstar considered his options. He could continue fighting, but against an enemy that had already proven capable of reaching the Empire's most secure locations. He could try to negotiate better terms, but humans had shown no interest in compromise. Or he could accept that his species had encountered something they had never faced before, an enemy that refused to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed certain. "We surrender," he transmitted. "The Valorian Empire formally yields to human forces." The war was over. It had lasted 8 months and 13 days. The Valorian Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia, was finished. 50 years later, Ambassador Eugen stood in the memorial chamber built on the ruins of the Valorian homeworld. The walls were covered with the names of 200 species that had been exterminated by Valorian expansion. Each name was carved in stone with a simple message below: never forget, never again. The chamber was visited by representatives from hundreds of species that had gained their freedom when the Empire fell. They came to remember the dead, but also to understand the lesson. The Valorians believed that being Alpha was their birthright, Eugen explained to a group of young aliens from across the galaxy. They thought that superior technology and greater numbers made them invincible. They forgot the most important rule of the universe. And what rule? Asked a small creature with large eyes and curious expression.